My name is Emily Carter, and my family has spent my entire life reminding me that I was never the important one. Not the successful one, not the favorite, just the extra. So when I stepped into the conference room that morning, my heart already knew what my face was trying to hide. The room was cold, glass walls, steel table, a downtown law firm that smelled like money and power. Everyone was already seated. Everyone, except me. They saw me walk in. They just didn't stop talking. My sister Rachel sat near the head of the table, legs crossed, posture relaxed. She looked confident, comfortable, like this meeting already belonged to her. There was one empty chair, at the very end. I took it. No one offered it. No one looked at me sitting down. That silence, that quiet decision to ignore me, it hurt more than insults ever did. Rachel finally glanced over. A slow smile touched her lips. "Well," she said lightly, "I honestly didn't think you'd show up today." A small laughter in the room. I felt my chest tighten. "I was invited," I replied. She tilted her head, pretending to think. "Were you, though?" They laughed because they felt safe, because to them I was predictable, quiet, weak, easy to overlook. They had no idea how carefully I'd planned this moment. What none of them realized was that I didn't come here hoping to be included. I came here knowing exactly when to speak and who would speak for me. The lawyer was late, which only gave them more time to enjoy themselves. "So, Emily," my Uncle Mark said casually, "are you still job hopping?" Rachel smirked. She calls it finding herself. I'd heard this my whole life. Normally, it would have broken me, but today, it barely touched me. "I'm doing fine," I said quietly. Rachel raised an eyebrow. "Sure you are." Then, the door behind me opened. Slow, deliberate. Footsteps echoed across the floor. The room changed. Conversations stopped. Chairs shifted. Someone cleared their throat. I didn't turn around yet. I wanted them to feel it. The weight, the tension, the sudden uncertainty. Rachel's smile faded first. I stood up. "I'm sorry," I said calmly, finally turning. "I was waiting for someone." The man stepped into the room. Older, mid-60s, tailored navy suit, calm eyes that didn't rush, didn't flinch, didn't ask permission. He looked like a man who controlled rooms like this. His gaze met mine, and he nodded. I placed my hand on the chair beside me and said slowly, "Everyone, this is Mr. Jonathan Hale." I didn't need to look at my sister. I could feel it. Her confidence cracked. Her face drained of color. And for the first time in my life, my family realized I wasn't alone. The conference room had gone completely silent. Even the city noise outside the glass walls seemed to pause, as if the world itself was waiting. I watched my sister, Rachel, struggle to keep her composure. Her hands gripped the table like she was holding on to every ounce of control she still had left. Her lips pressed into a tight line, and that smile, gone. Pause. Let the audience feel the tension. The door opened again. This time it was Miss Laura Bennett, the lawyer handling my father's estate. She was in her early 40s, sharp suit, sharp eyes, and sharper intuition. She carried a manila envelope in her hand, the kind of envelope you know contains life-altering decisions. She glanced around the room, her eyes briefly landing on Rachel. There was a flicker of expectation there. confidence, maybe even arrogance. She expected a smooth process. She expected me to sit quietly and disappear into the background, as usual. Emily thinks, they have no idea what's coming. "Good morning, everyone," Miss Bennet said, her tone polite but firm. She paused, letting her presence fill the room. "Shall we begin?" The envelope sat on the table like a ticking bomb. My Uncle Mark shifted in his seat, clearing his throat nervously. My aunt avoided eye contact completely. And Rachel? Rachel's eyes were now flicking between me and the envelope, like she was trying to predict what would happen next. I straightened my back, my palms lightly resting on the table. Jonathan Hale stood beside me, calm, composed, almost like he belonged to a different world, a world my family had never imagined I could access. And suddenly, the air changed. The lawyer opened the envelope with deliberate care, the soft crinkle of paper echoing in the tense room. She pulled out the first document. Names, percentages, properties, bank accounts. It all started to flow. "First," she glanced briefly at Rachel, "let's review the primary assets." Pause. Let it sink in. Rachel smirked faintly, trying to mask her unease. "Of course," she said, her voice a little too light. "I assume everything will go as expected." I smiled back at her. Not loudly, not arrogantly, just enough to make her pause. Because she didn't know. She didn't know that Jonathan Hale had already done the groundwork, the secret conversations, the legal loopholes, the one thing my family had never accounted for, that I had allies they didn't see coming. Slow, dramatic inner thought. Emily thinks, everything they built on assumptions is about to collapse. The lawyer handed the first document to my sister. She scanned it quickly, her confidence faltering. Her eyes widened slightly. She looked up at me. That tiny flicker of panic, the one she tried to hide, made my stomach tighten with anticipation. "Wait," said Rachel, her voice almost a whisper. This isn't right." I let the pause hang. Jonathan Hale leaned slightly forward, his eyes never leaving hers. There was no need for words. His presence alone was enough. The room was tense. Every single person could feel it. And then, the lawyer said the sentence that made the blood drain from Rachel's face even further. "According to your father's will, a significant portion of the estate will be held in trust for Miss Emily Carter, under the guidance of Mr. Jonathan Hale." Dramatic pause. Slow for voiceover. The words hit like ice water. Rachel's jaw dropped. My uncle's smug grin faltered. My aunt stiffened. And I allowed myself the smallest, quiet smile. Soft, controlled breath. They didn't see it coming. Not one of them. Jonathan Hale gave me a brief nod, almost imperceptible, and I knew this was only the beginning, because now the game had truly started. The room was heavy with silence. You could almost hear the clock ticking, though it was just the sudden absence of conversation. Rachel sat frozen, staring at the lawyer and then at the envelope. Her fingers fidgeted with her coffee cup, twisting it as though it could anchor her to reality. I leaned back slightly in my chair, calm, collected. Every nerve in my body was alive with anticipation. Jonathan Hale stood beside me, quietly scanning the room. Not a muscle out of place, not a glance wasted. His eyes were sharp, almost predatory, and I felt a surge of quiet power. This is what happens when they underestimate me. This is their mistake. Uncle Mark cleared his throat, trying to recover some control. "There must be some mistake," he said, voice tight. "Emily, this can't be right. You can't—" "Can't what?" I interrupted, calm, steady. Own what was promised to me? The words were simple, but the room reacted like a bomb had gone off. Rachel's eyes widened. Her carefully maintained composure was cracking, piece by piece. "Emily," Rachel said, her voice trembling slightly now, "you don't understand. This isn't what Dad intended." Jonathan Hale finally spoke, his voice low but deliberate. "Miss Carter's inheritance has been structured in full compliance with your father's wishes. Any attempt to contest it could lead to severe legal consequences." The room went colder. Even the air seemed to thicken. My aunt gasped softly, her eyes darting between Rachel and me. My uncle muttered something under his breath, but I didn't need to hear it. I could feel their panic vibrating through the polished table. I smiled faintly, not out of cruelty, not even fully out of triumph, but because I finally understood the power of silence. Because I finally understood that control isn't loud. All these years, I watched them take everything, but now they can only watch me. Rachel's hands trembled. She picked up a pen and started flipping through the documents, but she didn't even know what she was looking for. She was grasping at control she no longer had. And that's when Jonathan Hale stepped closer. His presence alone made the room shift again. The subtle power in his stance, the quiet command in his voice. He didn't need to yell, he didn't need to threaten. "You'll want to review the trust documents carefully, and I suggest you don't make any hasty decisions." It was more than a suggestion, it was a warning. The irony was delicious. My family, who had spent years mocking me, controlling me, and dismissing me, now had to swallow their fear quietly, without knowing exactly what was coming. I let the moment stretch. I let them squirm in it. Let them think they're in control. Let them believe they can fix this. Soon, they'll learn who really holds the cards. Rachel's hands finally spoke, her voice breaking. "Emily, what are you doing? This isn't fair." I leaned forward, my gaze fixed on hers. "Fair," I said, softly. "You mean like the way you always thought life should be. I'm just, finally, getting my turn." Jonathan Hale didn't need to add anything. The room already knew. This wasn't just inheritance. This was just the first move in a game they had never even realized they were playing. And I was just getting started. The room had shifted. The initial shock of the inheritance announcement had worn off, but what replaced it was far more dangerous. Fear mixed with anger. Rachel's hands were still shaking, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the documents as if trying to rewrite reality. My Uncle Mark's jaw was tight. He muttered under his breath, trying to figure out how to regain control. My aunt's eyes darted constantly, like prey in a cage. I stayed calm, too calm. That's the thing about power. The moment you show it, people can see it. But the moment you don't panic, they panic for you. Jonathan Hale leaned in slightly toward me, quietly, his presence reassuring. "Do not let them see your hesitation," he said softly, just enough for me to hear. "They've spent years thinking I'm weak. They've spent years underestimating me. Now it's their turn to flail." Rachel finally spoke, her voice sharper this time. "Emily, this isn't how Dad wanted it. You can't—" I held up a hand. "Rachel, stop." My tone was calm, almost gentle, but every word was a scalpel, cutting through her arrogance. Uncle Mark cleared his throat aggressively. "Emily, we can fight this legally. You don't stand a chance against the family collectively." I looked directly at him, my expression neutral but my eyes sharp. And yet, here I am, alone, with Jonathan. The words were simple, but the room felt heavier. The shift was subtle, almost imperceptible. My family began questioning themselves for the first time in years. The confidence they had relied on was slipping.
Jonathan Hale finally addressed the room, his voice smooth, deliberate, and icy. "Before anyone considers any legal action," he said, slowly, letting each word land like a hammer, "I must remind you that all assets are protected under trusts and clauses specifically designed to prevent hasty litigation. Any attempt to circumvent them will be costly." Rachel swallowed hard. She realized, just for a fraction of a second, that the rules had changed. I smiled faintly, not cruelly, not even fully out of triumph, but because I finally understood the power of silence. They built their empire on control, on fear, on believing they were untouchable. One by one, I'll show them how fragile that really is. Then came the first move I had planned. Jonathan Hale handed me a small, leather-bound folder. I opened it, slowly, deliberately. The contents weren't fully revealed yet, just enough papers to make my family sweat. Investment records, property deeds, trust clauses, all legally binding, all ironclad. I set it on the table. Rachel's eyes flicked to it. Her fingers trembled. "Emily, what is this?" she asked, her voice barely controlled. I let the words hang. The silence stretched. Then I said almost quietly, "The first of many." They didn't know what it meant. They couldn't, and by the time they figured it out, it would be too late. The trap was set, and my family, they didn't even realize they were already inside it. The room felt smaller now, the air thick with tension, the kind that makes your skin itch. Every eye was on me, every mind racing, trying to predict my next move. Rachel sat frozen, her fingers still trembling over the papers I had set down yesterday. My Uncle Mark leaned forward, a forced bravado in his posture, but his eyes betrayed the truth. He was scared. My aunt's lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to speak but didn't know what to say. And then Jonathan Hale spoke. "Before we proceed, I think everyone deserves full clarity," he said, calm and deliberate. "The assets in question are all held in a trust. Any attempt to transfer, contest, or misuse them will trigger clauses that irreversibly favor Miss Emily Carter." I watched Rachel's face pale. She had spent her life assuming the rules were always in her favor, and now the rules themselves had changed. They thought I would always be the quiet one. They thought I'd never fight. Now they're learning, quietly, painfully, that they were wrong. I leaned forward slightly, placing my hands gently on the table. "You've spent years trying to control me, to push me down, to make me feel invisible," I said, my voice calm, but each word cutting like glass. "You taught me what to avoid, what not to become, and for that, I thank you." I opened the leather folder fully. Photographs, documents, contracts, all meticulously arranged, each page a nail in the coffin of their assumptions, each sheet evidence that they had miscalculated me. "This isn't just about inheritance," I said softly, letting the words hang. "It's about respect. It's about accountability. It's about showing that underestimating someone has consequences." Rachel's lips quivered. "Emily, you can't." I held up a hand, as if to physically stop her words. "I can," I said, "and I will." Jonathan Hale stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. "Miss Carter's decisions regarding the trust are final. Any attempt to interfere will trigger the protective clauses immediately." The room went completely silent. My family realized for the first time that they were no longer in control. The power they had wielded for decades evaporated. I smiled faintly, not in triumph, not in malice, but in quiet satisfaction. They had thought their influence would last forever. They had thought I would remain powerless. But the truth was now undeniable. This is the moment they see me for who I am, not the background character, not the invisible sister. The one they underestimated was the one holding all the cards. Rachel leaned back, defeated. My Uncle Mark's jaw clenched. My aunt's hands trembled over her purse. Every flicker of control they had tried to maintain was gone. And I simply sat back, calm, collected, my hand resting lightly on the folder. The trap had closed. The revenge was complete. And in the silence of that conference room, for the first time in my life, I felt fully seen, fully powerful, fully free.